You already know what real connection feels like, deep down, in the quietest part of your soul. It's not the rush of a text message or the thrill of a compliment. It's the stillness that comes when you no longer have to explain yourself, when you can sit in silence with someone and feel completely at peace. Not because you're trying to impress them, but because you're finally free to be you. That peace isn't accidental. It's a signal, a quiet, undeniable proof that you are not just desired, you are understood. And that understanding doesn't come from surface-level charm or rehearsed lines. It comes from emotional investment, from someone who doesn't just see your smile but notices when it doesn't reach your eyes, from someone who doesn't walk away when you're overwhelmed, but gently asks, "What's weighing on you?" Not to fix it, but to share the weight. That's the third sign, emotional labor, not the draining kind that leaves you exhausted, but the kind that shows up in care, in effort, in the willingness to go beneath the surface. Most people are experts at receiving love, but few know how to truly give it. They expect you to carry the emotional load, initiating conversations, planning dates, decoding their moods, managing conflict. But someone who is emotionally attracted to you, they share the load. They don't wait for you to point out what's wrong. They pay attention. They notice when you're stressed. They adjust. They ask, "Is now a good time to talk?" before diving into heavy topics. They apologize not because they lost an argument, but because they care about your peace. That's not common. That's rare. And it's one of the clearest signs that someone isn't just physically drawn to you. They're emotionally invested, because emotional attraction doesn't just feel good. It feels safe. It feels like home. And home isn't built on passion alone. It's built on respect, on the quiet daily choices to honor the other person's heart. Think about the last time you felt truly seen, not admired, not wanted, seen. What made the difference? Was it the words they said? Or was it the way they showed up? The way they didn't interrupt when you spoke? The way they didn't dismiss your feelings as too much? The way they stayed present even when the conversation got hard? That's the work of emotional maturity. And it's not something you can fake for long. Pretending to care might fool someone for a while, but consistency reveals the truth. Someone who is emotionally attracted to you won't just show up when it's easy. They'll show up when it's inconvenient, when you're not at your best, when life is messy. They won't love you less when you're tired, when you're grieving, when you're uncertain. They'll love you through it. That's the difference between infatuation and intimacy. Infatuation wants perfection. Intimacy embraces reality. And if you've spent your life believing you had to be flawless to be loved, then this kind of love will feel like a revolution, because it tells you without words that you are already enough, that you don't have to earn this, that you are worthy of someone who chooses you not despite your flaws, but because they see the whole picture and they still want to be there. That's the fourth sign, integration. Someone who is emotionally attracted to you doesn't keep you separate from their life. They don't hide you. They don't make excuses for why you can't meet their friends, their family, their world. They bring you in, not all at once, not recklessly, but with intention. They talk about you when you're not around. They mention your opinions, your dreams, your quirks, as if you already belong. And when they introduce you to the people who matter, it's not with hesitation, but with pride. Not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet confidence of someone who knows they've found something real. That's not about status or validation. It's about alignment. It's the natural result of emotional connection, when two lives begin to weave together, not because they have to, but because they want to. And here's what most people miss. Emotional attraction doesn't create dependency. It creates partnership. It doesn't make you lose yourself. It helps you find yourself. Because when someone truly sees you and stays, it gives you permission to do the same, to stop hiding, to stop shrinking, to finally stop asking, "Am I enough?" and start living from the truth, "I am." And that truth changes everything. It shifts your standards. It raises your self-worth. It makes you unwilling to return to relationships where you're treated like an option, a distraction, a temporary escape. You begin to recognize the subtle signs of emotional unavailability, the silence after a hard day, the avoidance of deep conversation, the lack of effort when you're struggling. And instead of questioning yourself, you protect your peace. You walk away from what's empty, and you make space for what's real, because you've tasted what true emotional connection feels like, and you'll never settle for less again. 900 words, there's a quiet moment most people never talk about. The instant when you realize you're no longer willing to accept what used to feel normal. It doesn't come with fireworks or dramatic declarations. It happens in silence, often when you're alone, maybe folding laundry or staring out a window, and suddenly a truth settles into your bones. I don't want to go back to pretending, back to performing, back to relationships where you had to shrink, where your feelings were treated like inconveniences, where love felt conditional on your mood, your appearance, your ability to keep the peace. That moment, the quiet breaking point, is one of the most powerful turning points in a person's life. Not because it's loud, but because it's final. It's the moment your self-respect catches up with your heart. And from that moment forward, nothing is the same. You stop asking, why don't they see me? And start realizing, I see me, and I won't hide anymore. That clarity is the fifth sign, not of someone else's feelings, but of your own transformation. Because emotional attraction can only be recognized when you're emotionally awake, when you've done the inner work. When you've stopped seeking validation and started honoring your own truth. And that work? It's not about fixing yourself. It's about freeing yourself. Freeing yourself from the belief that you have to earn love. Freeing yourself from the fear that if you speak your truth, you'll be abandoned. Freeing yourself from the exhausting cycle of chasing people who only show up halfway. Real emotional connection doesn't thrive in insecurity. It thrives in courage. The courage to be honest, to set boundaries, to walk away from what dims your light. And when you finally choose yourself, something shifts in the energy around you. You stop attracting people who want a version of you. You start drawing in those who want the real thing, because emotional attraction is magnetic. It doesn't respond to perfection. It responds to authenticity. It's drawn to the person who isn't afraid to say, this matters to me, or I need space, or I'm not okay. That kind of honesty isn't pushy. It's powerful. It creates a field of integrity that only emotionally mature people can enter. And when someone does, you'll feel it, not in their words, but in their actions, in the way they respect your boundaries without resentment, in how they don't punish you for speaking up, in the way they say, thank you for telling me, instead of shutting down. That's not just kindness, that's emotional intelligence. And it's one of the strongest indicators that someone isn't just physically attracted to you. They're building something real. Because emotional attraction doesn't fear honesty. It welcomes it. It understands that conflict, when handled with care, doesn't break a connection. It deepens it. Most people run from hard conversations. They see disagreement as danger. But someone who is truly invested in you, they lean in, they listen. They don't attack, they don't disappear. They stay and work through it because they value the relationship more than being right. That's rare. And it's not something you can demand. It's something you attract by becoming it, by raising your standards, by refusing to settle for love that feels like walking on eggshells. You begin to notice the subtle patterns, the way they respond when you set a limit, the way they handle disappointment, the way they treat you when they're stressed. Do they blame you? Do they withdraw? Or do they take responsibility? Do they communicate? Do they care about your peace? These aren't small things. They're everything. Because love isn't just what someone says in good moments. Love is what they do in difficult ones. And when you start seeing that, when you start trusting your instincts instead of their promises, you gain something unshakable: power. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that liberates. The power to walk away. The power to say no. The power to choose peace over chaos, depth over drama, truth over illusion. And with that power comes freedom. The freedom to love from a place of wholeness, not lack. To connect from strength, not need. To be with someone, not because you're afraid of being alone, but because you genuinely want to be together. That's the foundation of real emotional attraction. It's not about being needed. It's about being chosen again and again, because who you are matters more than how you look, more than what you can offer, more than how you make them feel in the moment. It's about being loved for your depth, your resilience, your quiet strength, the way you show up even when no one's watching. And when you finally recognize that, you stop searching for proof. You become the proof. 900 words: you were never meant to beg for someone's attention. You were never meant to twist yourself into a version that fits easier into their life, to silence your needs, to dim your voice just to keep them close. That kind of love doesn't fill you. It drains you. It doesn't grow you. It shrinks you. And the deepest tragedy isn't that you've experienced that kind of connection. It's that you started to believe it was all you deserved. But here's the truth that changes everything. Real emotional attraction doesn't require you to shrink. It requires you to expand. It doesn't ask you to hide your depth. It leans into it. It doesn't shy away from your intensity. It honors it. And when you finally realize that, when you stop apologizing for feeling deeply, for caring fiercely, for loving fully, something inside you shifts from survival to sovereignty. You stop chasing validation and start living from worth. And that shift, it doesn't just change your relationships, it changes your entire life. Because when you refuse to be small anymore, you create space for people who don't want a small version of you. You attract those who aren't intimidated by your strength, your insight, your emotional clarity. They don't see your sensitivity as weakness. They see it as courage. They don't fear your honesty. They respect it. And in their eyes, you don't have to prove anything. You simply get to be. That's the sixth and final sign, mutual growth. Not dependency, not obsession, not clinging, but growth. A connection where both people feel safer, braver, more alive because of each other. Where love isn't a cage, but a catalyst. Where being together doesn't mean losing yourself. It means remembering yourself. Most people think love is about finding someone who completes them. But real emotional attraction isn't about completion. It's about companionship. It's two whole people choosing to walk side by side, not because they need to, but because they want to. And in that space, there's no power struggle, no silent resentment, no fear of abandonment, only partnership. That kind of bond doesn't happen by accident. It's built day by day, choice by choice, in the way they support your dreams even when they don't fully understand them, in how they celebrate your wins like they're their own, in the way they don't feel threatened by your success, your voice, your independence. Emotional attraction doesn't fear freedom, it creates it. It doesn't trap, it trusts. And trust isn't given through words, it's earned through consistency, through showing up, through choosing you, not just in the beginning, but in the middle, when the newness has worn off, when life gets heavy, when the easy answers are gone. That's where real love proves itself, not in the first month. Not in the honeymoon phase, but in year 2, year 5, year 10, when most people have already walked away. And if you've been hurt before, if you've given your heart to people who only wanted a fraction of you, this kind of love might feel unfamiliar. You might doubt it. You might wait for the other shoe to drop. But the truth is, not everyone will leave. Not everyone will fail you. Not everyone confuses passion with control. There are people who know how to love with both heart and honor, who understand that real connection isn't about possession. It's about permission, permission to be seen, permission to grow, permission to change. And when you find that, when you finally meet someone who doesn't just tolerate your evolution, but celebrates it, you'll know, not because they say it, but because you feel it. In the ease, in the safety, in the quiet joy of being known and still chosen. And here's the most powerful part. This kind of connection starts with you. It starts the moment you decide that peace is non-negotiable, that respect is mandatory, that love should never feel like anxiety in disguise. When you stop accepting breadcrumbs and start demanding a feast, not out of pride, but out of self-knowledge, because you finally understand you are not a backup plan. You are not a distraction. You are not someone's second choice. You are someone's peace, someone's home, someone's I can't believe I get to love you moment. And that truth, once you own it, changes everything. You stop begging for attention and start embodying worth. You stop chasing people and start becoming the kind of person love naturally flows toward, calm, clear, grounded, unshakable in your value. And when that happens, you won't need to look for signs anymore. You'll just know, because real emotional attraction doesn't hide. It shows up, it stays, it builds, and it reflects back to you the love you've finally learned to give yourself. This is your life. You don't have to earn love. You just have to be ready for it. And if you've made it this far, if you've kept listening, kept feeling, kept believing, then you're already ready. 900 words you've spent so much time wondering if you were enough, measuring yourself against silent standards, replaying conversations, analyzing glances, trying to decode whether someone truly sees you or just the idea of you. But what if the real question isn't, are they emotionally attracted to me, but am I emotionally available to myself? Because the truth no one warns you about is this. You cannot recognize real love until you stop abandoning yourself. You cannot spot emotional safety when you're used to chaos. You cannot trust consistency when your inner voice keeps whispering that you're unworthy of it. The mirror you hold up to relationships is shaped by the way you treat your own heart. And if you've spent years silencing your needs, ignoring your pain, or shrinking to make others comfortable, then of course you'd attract people who don't know how to meet you. You've trained your nervous system to accept less. You've normalized anxiety, mistaken intensity for care, and labeled control as protection. But love should never leave you breathless from fear. It should leave you grounded, held, certain, and the journey to recognizing that kind of connection doesn't start with watching someone else's behavior. It starts with listening to your own silence. The quiet moment after a text goes unanswered, the pause before you speak up about something that matters, the breath you hold when you're about to set a boundary. That's where the real work begins. Not in decoding someone's actions, but in honoring your own instincts. Because emotional attraction isn't just something you observe in another person. It's something you feel in your body. It's the absence of tension, the release of your shoulders when they walk into the room, the deep exhale when they say your name. It's not excitement that makes your stomach drop. It's peace that makes your chest open. And if you've been living in survival mode, if your heart has been armored for years, that sensation might feel foreign. You might not even recognize safety when it shows up. You might mistake calm for disinterest. You might confuse stability for boredom. But the truth is, your body knows. It remembers what love should feel like. It remembers the difference between being wanted and being cherished. And once you start paying attention, not to their words, but to your internal weather, you'll begin to see the patterns clearly. When someone is emotionally attracted to you, you won't feel the need to perform. You won't feel drained after spending time together. You won't lie awake questioning their intentions. You won't feel like you're carrying the entire emotional weight of the relationship. Instead, you'll feel lighter, clearer, more like yourself. That's not a coincidence. That's alignment. That's what happens when two people are emotionally in sync, not because they're perfect, but because they're present. They don't create drama to feel connected. They don't use silence as a weapon. They don't make you prove your loyalty. They understand that real intimacy is built on trust, not tests. And the most powerful sign of emotional attraction isn't something they do. It's what they don't do. They don't make you feel small. They don't dismiss your feelings. They don't punish you for being honest. They don't disappear when things get real. They stay. They show up. They choose you, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire to walk beside you, not ahead of you, not behind you, but with you. And that kind of love doesn't demand perfection. It embraces growth. It doesn't fear your shadows. It walks through them with you. It doesn't expect you to have all the answers. It's okay with not knowing, with sitting in the uncertainty, with saying, I don't know either, but I'm here. That's the foundation of real connection, not grand declarations, not flawless moments, but the courage to be imperfect together, to be human together. And when you finally experience that, when you stop chasing love that feels like a storm and start recognizing love that feels like shelter, everything shifts. You stop asking, do they love me? And start living from the truth. I am loved because I am lovable. Not because of what you do, not because of how you look, not because you earned it, but because you exist, because your heart beats, because you feel deeply, because you keep going even when it's hard. That's enough, more than enough. And the right person won't just agree, they'll reflect it back to you in every choice they make, in every word they speak, in every quiet moment they stay when others would have left. This is your life. You don't have to earn depth. You were born with it. You don't have to prove your worth. You carry it in your breath. And the love you've been searching for, it's not out there waiting for you to become someone else. It's here, waiting for you to become yourself, fully, fearlessly, unapologetically. And when you do, you won't need to look for signs. You'll just know, because you'll feel it in your bones, in your breath, in the quiet certainty that you are, at last, exactly where you're meant to be. 900 words, you already carry the answer. Not in someone else's gaze, not in their words, not in the way they hold your hand or remember your favorite song, but in the quiet space between your breaths where truth lives. That space, that stillness is where you've always known what you deserve. Not because you've been told, but because your soul refuses to lie to you. It whispers in the moments you're alone, when the performance ends and the mask slips. This isn't enough, you're meant for more. And that whisper isn't doubt. It's direction. It's the compass within you pointing toward a love that doesn't demand sacrifice, a connection that doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. Because the deepest form of emotional attraction isn't something you find in another person. It's something you awaken in yourself. It's the moment you stop looking for proof that you're worthy and start living as if you already are. That shift changes everything. Not because the world suddenly becomes kinder, but because you stop begging for scraps from people who can't give you a feast. You stop interpreting silence as mystery and start recognizing it for what it often is: absence. You stop romanticizing inconsistency and begin honoring consistency as the truest form of care. And in that clarity, you gain something unshakable: peace. Not the kind that comes from finally being chosen, but the kind that comes from finally choosing yourself. Because real emotional connection doesn't thrive in uncertainty. It flourishes in integrity, in the courage to say, I won't wait anymore, not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of love for yourself, for your time, for your heart. You begin to see that every moment spent questioning someone's feelings is a moment stolen from your own growth. Every hour spent analyzing a text, replaying a glance, wondering if they care, is an hour you'll never get back. And what if, instead of pouring that energy into someone who hasn't proven they're capable of depth, you turned it inward? What if you asked, not do they see me, but am I seeing me? Am I honoring my needs? Am I protecting my peace? Am I speaking my truth even when it's hard? That's where transformation begins. Not in waiting to be loved, but in deciding to love yourself first. Not as a cliche, not as a trend, but as a daily practice. As the non-negotiable foundation of everything you build. Because when you stop treating your worth as something that needs validation, you stop attracting people who can't offer it. You stop making space for those who confuse attention with affection, jealousy with passion, control with care. You raise your standards not as a demand, but as a reflection of what you now know to be true. You are not a backup plan. You are not a temporary comfort. You are not someone's escape from their loneliness. You are a home, a sanctuary, a person who deserves someone who doesn't just want you, but values you. And that kind of love doesn't rush, it doesn't pressure, it doesn't make you feel like you're always one mistake away from being replaced. It's steady, it's safe, it's certain. And the most powerful sign of emotional attraction isn't a grand gesture, it's the absence of games. No mixed signals, no hot and cold, no making you prove your loyalty. Just clear, consistent presence, the kind of presence that lets you relax, that lets you breathe, that lets you finally stop asking, what do they want, and start enjoying, what do we want? That's the essence of real partnership, not dependency, not obsession, but shared intention. Two people choosing each other, not because they can't live without the other, but because they genuinely want to live with them. And when you finally experience that, when you stop mistaking anxiety for passion and start recognizing peace as proof, you'll never go back. Not because you're stubborn, but because you're awake, because you've felt what it's like to be with someone who doesn't just desire your presence, but respects your boundaries, honors your voice, and stays when things get hard. That kind of love doesn't drain you, it fuels you. It doesn't shrink you, it expands you. And the most beautiful part, it starts within. The moment you decide that your heart is not up for negotiation, that your time is not endless, that your peace is not optional, that's when everything changes. Not because the world suddenly shifts, but because you do. And from that place of inner authority, you don't search for love, you become it. You radiate it, you attract it, not through effort, but through alignment. And when the right person finds you, they won't need to be convinced. They'll just know, because they'll feel in your presence what you finally learned to feel in your own, that you are whole, that you are enough, that you are and always have been worthy of a love that doesn't make you beg for proof. 900 words, there's a moment, quiet, unannounced, when you realize you no longer fear being alone, not because you've given up, not because you've become cynical, but because you've finally met yourself. Not the version you show the world, not the one shaped by other people's expectations, but the raw, real, unedited truth of who you are. And in that meeting, something shifts. You stop seeing solitude as emptiness and start recognizing it as space. Space to breathe, to feel, to grow, to simply be without performance. That shift is revolutionary. Because the moment you stop fearing your own company, you stop needing someone else to complete you. You stop mistaking loneliness for love. You stop clinging to connections that feel like chains disguised as comfort. And in that freedom, you become magnetic. Not because you're trying to attract anyone, but because you're finally aligned with your own truth. And truth has a frequency. It hums beneath the surface of every word you speak, every choice you make, every boundary you hold. People feel it, not because you announce it, but because you live it. You don't have to tell them you're different. They sense it in the way you carry yourself, in the calmness of your presence, the steadiness of your gaze, the way you don't scramble for attention or validation. That energy, grounded, self-assured, unshakable, is the most powerful sign of emotional maturity, and it's also the greatest filter. It naturally repels those who thrive on chaos, who need drama to feel alive, who confuse obsession with intimacy, because emotional attraction isn't drawn to neediness, it's drawn to wholeness. It doesn't want someone to fix, it wants someone to join. And when you become that person, someone who is at peace with their own heart, you stop attracting temporary connections and start inviting lasting ones, not by chasing, not by performing, but by simply being. That's the power of self-possession. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it simply exists. And in its presence, love doesn't feel like a gamble. It feels like a choice, a mutual, conscious, daily decision to show up, to care, to stay. And when someone who is emotionally attracted to you meets you in that space, they don't try to change you. They don't try to fix your past or erase your pain. They don't pressure you to open up before you're ready. They simply honor the pace of your heart. They understand that trust isn't earned in grand gestures, but in small, consistent acts of respect, in the way they listen without interrupting, in how they remember what you've shared, even if it was said in passing, in the way they don't use your vulnerabilities against you later. That's not just kindness, that's emotional integrity. And it's one of the rarest, most valuable qualities in a person, because the world is full of people who want to be close to you, but very few who know how to be with you, who can sit in the quiet, hold space for your silence, and not feel the need to fill it with noise, who don't see your depth as a burden, but as a gift, who don't run when you're sad, stressed, or uncertain, but move closer. That's the essence of real emotional attraction. It doesn't fear your humanity. It embraces it. It doesn't demand perfection. It cherishes authenticity. And when you finally experience that, when you stop measuring love by intensity and start recognizing it by consistency, you'll never settle for less again. Not because you're prideful, but because you're clear. You know what peace feels like. You know what safety sounds like. You know what it's like to be with someone who doesn't make you feel like you're always one misstep away from being abandoned. And that knowing changes everything. It raises your standards not as a barrier, but as a boundary. Not to keep people out, but to protect what's sacred, your time, your energy, your heart. And when you guard those with love, not fear, not resentment, but deep self-respect, you create the conditions for real connection to grow, not forced, not rushed, but organically, naturally, like a tree that doesn't need to prove it's alive. It simply is, and that's the truth you must carry forward. You are already whole. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to be smaller, quieter, easier to love. You just need to be seen. And the right person won't just see you, they'll celebrate you, not for what you can give them, but for who you are. And when that love finds you, you won't have to wonder if it's real. You'll feel it in your bones, in the ease, in the quiet joy of being known, accepted, and chosen. Not despite your truth, but because of it. This is your life. You don't have to earn depth. You were born with it. You don't have to prove your worth. You carry it in your breath. And the love you've been searching for, it's not out there waiting for you to become someone else. It's here waiting for you to become yourself. Fully, fearlessly, unapologetically. And when you do, you won't need to look for signs. You'll just know, because you'll feel it in your bones, in your breath, in the quiet certainty that you are, at last, exactly where you're meant to be. 900 words. You've been taught to look for love in the loud moments, the grand declarations, the passionate arguments, the late-night texts that say, I can't stop thinking about you. But real emotional attraction doesn't live there. It lives in the quiet, in the ordinary, in the unremarkable moments that most people overlook. It's in the way someone hands you your coffee exactly how you like it without being asked, in how they pause the movie when you get up, not because they have to, but because they don't want you to miss a second. In the way they say your name when you walk into the room, not to get your attention, but to acknowledge your presence, as if the space just became more complete. These aren't small things, they're everything. Because emotional attraction isn't built on fireworks, it's built on attention, on the kind of focused, consistent care that can't be faked. It's not about what someone says when they're trying to impress you, it's about what they do when no one's watching, when the world is heavy, when you're not at your best, when you're quiet, tired, unsure. That's when Emotional availability proves itself, not in words, but in presence, not in passion, but in patience. And if you've spent your life chasing intensity, mistaking anxiety for connection, then this kind of love might feel underwhelming at first. You might think, if they're not obsessed, if they're not dramatic, if they don't make me feel like I'm losing my mind, do they even care? But here's the truth. Obsession is fear in disguise. It's insecurity dressed as romance. Real emotional attraction, on the other hand, is calm. It doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't create chaos to feel alive. It doesn't punish you with silence or guilt. It chooses you quietly, steadily, day after day. And that consistency, that's the loudest signal of all, because anyone can be charming when the mood is right. But who stays when you're struggling? Who listens when you're not saying anything profound, just trying to make sense of your day? Who doesn't flinch when you're vulnerable? Who doesn't turn your pain into a burden? That's the one. That's the person who isn't just physically attracted to you, they're emotionally invested. And emotional investment shows up in effort, not the kind of effort that's draining or forced, but the kind that feels natural, effortless, like breathing. It's remembering your mother's name. It's asking about your job interview, even if they don't fully understand what you do. It's sending you a song because it reminded them of you, not because they want something in return, but because they wanted you to feel seen. That's the language of emotional attraction. It's not spoken. It's lived. And the more you attune yourself to it, the more you'll recognize it, not just in others, but in yourself. Because the ability to give this kind of love starts with receiving it from yourself. If you've spent years dismissing your own feelings, pushing through pain, silencing your needs, then of course, you'd attract someone who does the same. You've normalized emotional neglect. You've mistaken distance for independence. But real strength isn't in shutting down. It's in showing up. It's in saying, I'm hurting and still being willing to connect. It's in setting a boundary with love, not resentment. It's in communicating your needs without apology. And when you start doing that for yourself first, you raise the entire frequency of your relationships. You stop attracting people who can't meet you, and you begin drawing in those who already live at that level of care. Because emotional attraction is reciprocal. It doesn't thrive in imbalance. It grows in mutual respect, in shared vulnerability, in the quiet understanding that both people are committed to showing up, not perfectly, but consistently. And when you find that, when you stop chasing love that feels like a storm and start recognizing love that feels like shelter, you'll know, not because they say I love you first, not because they plan extravagant dates, but because you feel safe, because you can breathe, because you no longer feel the need to prove your worth, because you're not wondering if they care, you just know. And that knowing doesn't come from their actions alone. It comes from your courage to trust yourself, to believe that peace is not boring, that consistency is not lack of passion, that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. You've been sold a lie, that love is drama, that passion is pain, that if it's easy, it must not be meaningful. But the truth is, real love isn't hard. It's not exhausting. It doesn't leave you questioning your sanity. It lifts you. It steadies you. It makes you feel more like yourself, not less. And when you finally experience that, when you stop mistaking turbulence for depth, you'll never go back. Not because you're stubborn, but because you're awake, because you felt what it's like to be with someone who doesn't just want you when you're easy to love, but stays when it's hard. That's the real test. That's the truest sign. And once you've known it, you won't settle for anything less. 900 words you've been conditioned to believe that love is something you earn, that if you're kind enough, patient enough, accommodating enough, someone will finally see your worth and choose you. But here's the truth that will change your life. Love is not a reward for good behavior. It's a reflection of self-respect. And the moment you stop performing and start honoring your own boundaries, everything shifts. Not because the world suddenly becomes fair, but because you stop participating in relationships that demand your silence. You stop staying in conversations that drain you. You stop smiling when you want to cry. You stop pretending you're okay when you're breaking inside. And in that refusal to betray yourself, you become untouchable. Not cold, not distant, but clear. And clarity is magnetic. It doesn't shout, it doesn't beg. It simply exists, and in its presence, emotional attraction either rises to meet it or reveals itself as hollow, because real connection cannot survive in the shadow of self-abandonment. It needs truth. It needs honesty. It needs someone who isn't afraid to say, this doesn't work for me, or I need space, or I'm not okay. That kind of courage isn't learned overnight. It's forged in the quiet moments when you choose yourself, not out of defiance, but out of love. Love for your peace, love for your time, love for your heart. And when you begin to protect those things not as acts of resistance, but as sacred commitments, you send a signal loud and clear that you are no longer available for relationships built on imbalance. You are no longer willing to be the only one trying, the only one communicating, the only one showing up. You want mutual effort, mutual care, mutual presence. And that standard isn't harsh. It's healthy. It's the foundation of emotional maturity, because emotional attraction doesn't thrive in one-sided effort. It grows in shared responsibility, in the understanding that both people are invested not just in the good moments, but in the hard ones. In the willingness to say we're struggling instead of pretending everything is fine. In the courage to ask for help, not as a sign of weakness, but as an act of trust. And when someone responds to that with openness, with patience, with a genuine desire to understand, you'll feel it, not in their words, but in your body. The tension in your chest softens, your breath deepens, you stop bracing for disappointment. Because you're not being managed, you're being met. And that meeting, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, is the essence of real intimacy. It's not about knowing everything about someone. It's about feeling safe enough to not know and still stay. It's about disagreeing without disconnecting. It's about being angry and still choosing care. It's about being hurt and still being willing to repair. That's not common, that's rare. And it doesn't happen in relationships where one person carries the entire emotional load. It only exists when both people are committed to growth, not just comfort. Because comfort is easy, growth is hard, and emotional attraction isn't drawn to ease. It's drawn to courage, the courage to be honest, to be vulnerable, to be accountable. When someone admits they were wrong without being forced. When they apologize not to end an argument but to restore peace. When they don't blame you for their bad day. When they take ownership of their energy, their words, their actions. That's the proof. That's the sign. Not grand gestures, not love letters, but daily, quiet acts of integrity. And the more you attune yourself to these moments, the more you'll realize emotional attraction isn't something you find, it's something you recognize. And you can only recognize it when you've stopped confusing intensity with intimacy, when you've stopped mistaking anxiety for passion, when you've stopped believing that love should feel like a storm. Real love doesn't leave you breathless from fear. It leaves you grounded, held, certain, and that certainty doesn't come from someone else's behavior alone. It comes from your own inner alignment, from the moment you decide that your peace is non-negotiable, that your time is precious, that your heart is not up for negotiation. And when you live from that truth, you don't attract love. You become a magnet for it, not through effort, not through manipulation, not through trying to be more likable, but through simply being real, through showing up as you are, through refusing to shrink, through speaking your truth with kindness, through setting boundaries with love. That's the power you carry. That's the transformation that changes everything. And when the right person finds you, they won't need to be convinced. They'll just know. Because they'll feel in your presence what you've finally learned to feel in your own, that you are whole, that you are enough, that you are and always have been worthy of a love that doesn't make you beg for proof. 900 words. You are not meant to be a secret. You are not meant to exist in the shadows of someone's life, hidden from their world, introduced only when convenient, loved only when it doesn't disrupt their comfort. That is not connection. That is not emotional attraction. That is convenience disguised as care. And if you've ever felt that quiet ache, the one that comes not from rejection, but from being almost chosen, almost seen, almost valued, then this is where you reclaim yourself. Because real emotional attraction doesn't hide. It doesn't make you feel like a backup plan. It doesn't leave you wondering where you stand. It brings you in, not all at once, not recklessly, but with intention. It introduces you to their friends not as a passing fling, but as someone important. It mentions your name in conversation when you're not around, not to impress, but because you've become part of their story. That's the sign, not grand announcements, but natural inclusion. The way they talk about you, the way they make space for you, the way they don't hesitate to say, she's coming with me, or that's my person. There's no ambiguity, no games, no silence after a meaningful moment, just clarity. And that clarity is not loud. It's steady. It's in the way they include you in plans before you even ask. in how they share parts of their life with you, photos, memories, dreams, not because they have to, but because they want to. Emotional attraction doesn't fear integration, it welcomes it. It doesn't treat your presence as a threat to their independence. It sees you as an extension of their peace, not a disruption of their freedom. And if you've spent years being treated like an option, this kind of love will feel unfamiliar. You might doubt it. You might wait for the moment they pull back, for the silence to return, for the distance to grow. But the truth is, not everyone will leave. Not everyone will fail you. There are people who know how to love without fear, who understand that real connection isn't about possession, it's about partnership. And in that space, you don't lose yourself, you find yourself. Because when someone is emotionally attracted to you, they don't try to change you. They don't pressure you to be more outgoing, more relaxed, more like their ex. They don't make you feel like you're too much, too sensitive, too intense. They see those parts of you not as flaws, but as depth, as strength, as beauty. And they don't just tolerate your quiet days, they honor them. They don't demand constant energy. They understand that love isn't a performance, it's a presence. And presence doesn't require you to be on all the time, it requires you to be real. That's what emotional attraction responds to: authenticity, not perfection, not charm, not how you look in the morning light, but how you show up in the hard moments, when you're tired, when you're grieving, when you're unsure. That's when real connection proves itself, not in passion, but in patience, not in words, but in staying. Because anyone can love you when you're easy, but who stays when you're not? Who doesn't flinch when you're struggling? Who doesn't make your pain about them? That's the one. That's the person who isn't just physically attracted to you. They're emotionally invested. And emotional investment shows up in consistency, in the way they check in, not because they feel guilty, but because they genuinely care, in how they remember the small things: your favorite tea, the name of your childhood dog, the story you told once about your dream of traveling to the mountains. They don't just hear you, they listen. And listening is not passive, it's an act of love. It says, you matter, your thoughts matter, your feelings matter. And when you're with someone who listens like that, you stop feeling like you have to fight for attention. You stop explaining yourself, you stop shrinking, you begin to relax, to breathe, to simply be. And in that safety, you grow. Not because they fixed you, but because they created space for you to heal, to evolve, to become more of who you are. That's the power of real emotional attraction. It doesn't drain you. It fuels you. It doesn't make you smaller. It makes you larger. And the most beautiful part? It starts with you. The moment you decide that you are not a secret, that you are not an option, that you are not someone's temporary comfort, you are a person worthy of full visibility, of full commitment, of full love. And when you live from that truth, you don't attract love. You become its natural home, not through effort, not through manipulation, not through trying to be more likable, but through simply being real, through refusing to hide, through speaking your truth with kindness, through setting boundaries with love. That's the transformation. That's the shift. And when the right person finds you, they won't need to be convinced. They'll just know, because they'll feel in your presence what you've finally learned to feel in your own. That you are whole, that you are enough, that you are and always have been worthy of a love that doesn't make you beg for proof. 900 words you've been taught to look for love in the grand gestures, the surprise trips, the poetic texts, the dramatic declarations under streetlights. But real emotional attraction doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It whispers. It shows up in the silence between words, in the way someone doesn't rush to fill the space, but instead sits with you in it, comfortable in the stillness, unafraid of what's not being said. That's where true connection lives, not in performance, but in presence, not in what's spoken, but in what's felt. And if you've spent your life mistaking noise for intimacy, then this quiet kind of love might feel unfamiliar at first. You might wonder if they're not trying harder, if they're not showing off, if they're not making me feel like I'm losing my mind. Do they even care? But here's the truth. Chaos is not passion. Anxiety is not love. Real emotional attraction doesn't leave you breathless from uncertainty. It leaves you grounded. It makes you feel safe. It allows you to relax into your own skin, to stop performing, to finally exhale. And that peace, that deep, unshakable calm, is the loudest signal of all, because anyone can create drama. Anyone can make you feel intense, but only someone who is truly emotionally attracted to you can make you feel seen without saying a word. They notice the shift in your energy before you speak. They sense when you're holding back. They don't dismiss your silence as disinterest. They honor it. They don't pressure you to talk. They simply stay. And in that staying, they say more than words ever could. You don't have to explain yourself. I'm here. That's the essence of emotional safety. It's not built in a day. It's earned in moments. Small, quiet, consistent choices to show up, to care, to respect your inner world. It's in the way they don't interrupt when you're speaking, not because they're being polite, but because they genuinely want to hear you. It's in how they remember the things you've shared, even if it was just a passing comment about a childhood memory or a fear you mentioned in passing. They don't forget. They don't dismiss. They hold space for your truth, even when it's messy, even when it's uncomfortable. And that kind of emotional labor, the willingness to go beneath the surface, to engage with your heart, not just your appearance, is rare. It's not something you can demand. It's something you attract by becoming it, by raising your own standard, by refusing to settle for love that feels like walking on eggshells. Because real emotional attraction doesn't thrive in fear. It grows in trust, in the quiet confidence that you can be honest and still be loved, that you can say, I'm struggling and not be abandoned, that you can set a boundary and not be punished. That's not just kindness, that's emotional maturity. And it's one of the clearest signs that someone isn't just physically drawn to you, they're invested in your well-being. They care about your peace. They respect your process. They don't try to fix you. They don't rush your healing. They simply walk beside you, not ahead, not behind, but with you. And when you finally experience that, when you stop measuring love by intensity and start recognizing it by consistency, you'll never go back. Not because you're prideful, but because you're clear. You know what safety feels like. You know what respect sounds like. You know what it's like to be with someone who doesn't make you feel like you have to earn their attention. That knowing changes everything. It raises your standards not as a wall, but as a filter. Not to keep people out, but to protect what's sacred, your time, your energy, your heart. And when you guard those with love, not fear, you create the conditions for real connection to grow. Not forced, not rushed, but naturally, like a tree that doesn't need to prove it's alive. It simply is. And that's the truth you must carry forward. You are already whole. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to be smaller, quieter, easier to love. You just need to be seen. And the right person won't just see you. They'll celebrate you, not for what you can give them, but for who you are. And when that love finds you, you won't have to wonder if it's real. You'll feel it in your bones, in the ease, in the quiet joy of being known, accepted, and chosen, not despite your truth, but because of it. This is your life. You don't have to earn depth. You were born with it. You don't have to prove your worth. You carry it in your breath. And the love you've been searching for, it's not out there waiting for you to become someone else. It's here waiting for you to become yourself, fully, fearlessly, unapologetically. And when you do, you won't need to look for signs. You'll just know, because you'll feel it in your bones, in your breath, in the quiet certainty that you are, at last, exactly where you're meant to be.